Chapter 901, Back on Land. After Su Nuanchi's request to go to the island to her final ending, Zhu Lark didn't say a word. I wasn't sure when it started, but her heart slowly became indifferent. It's better to say that it became realistic. She didn't dare to provoke Zhang Yi anymore, because she was afraid that at any moment, she would meet the same end as Su Nuanchi. Zhang Yi rested in his room for a while. After an hour, he felt that things had been taken care of over there. So he got up and told old Tian to gather everyone on the ship and prepare to go ashore. This time, he gave everyone a weapon, including the teenagers. The guns in these people's hands could not pose a threat to Zhang Yi, Zhou Keir, and the crew, but they were lethal against the pirates on the island who had no protective gear. From now on, flatten all the pirates on this island for me. Zhang Yi held up a finger to remind them, you will all be living here for the next while. If any of you are left alive and they reveal your location, then you can refer to the pile on the beach to see what will happen to all of you. The group was horrified and nodded eagerly. Old Tian then began lowering the small boat and sending everyone ashore. They began a thorough cleaning of the island. Facing Zhang Yi and the others, who had an absolute firepower advantage, these pirates on the island, with their meager equipment, did not have any chance of fighting back. There were also mutants among the pirates. However, in front of Zhang Yi, he was as weak as a 3-year-old child and was no different. Zhang Yi casually shot him and pierced his skull. It only took 2 hours for Zhang Yi and the others to completely clean out this small island. Zhang Yi arrived at the pirates' lair, which was a warm and deep cave, perfect for hiding from the cold in the cold end times. The smell of blood was extremely strong inside, with bones everywhere and a fishy stench that made people want to vomit. Zhang Yi called everyone here and told them, from now on, you will live here for a while. I will go back to Huashu Kingdom first, and then I will come back with reinforcements to take you all back. Hearing that Zhang Yi was leaving, the crew were still a little worried, for fear that Zhang Yi would abandon them. Zhang Yi repeatedly explained that the crew and Zhu Lark would also stay for the time being, and the crew were relieved. But this time, it was Zhu Lark's turn to be afraid. She ran anxiously next to Zhang Yi and begged, Zhang Yi, don't leave me here. Can you take me with you? Zhang Yi looked at her and said, I can only take one person at a time. Don't worry, just wait here for me to come back. In fact, it was not impossible to take 2 people at once. Zhou Keir and Zhu Lark only weighed about 200 pounds in total. But Zhang Yi had to guard against enemies in the space shuttle, so he needed to keep one hand free. Besides, he was only protecting Zhu Lark to save face for Zhu Zheng, and he didn't consider her an important person. How could he risk his life for her? Zhu Lark felt aggrieved, but she also knew that her place in Zhang Yi's heart was far inferior to Zhou Keir's, so she had to say, then you must go quickly and come back quickly. I'll wait here for you to come back. Zhang Yi told old Tian to collect everyone's communication equipment to prevent them from accidentally operating it and revealing their current location. Then he left everyone enough water and food to last for a while, and he prepared to leave the island with Zhou Keir. Holding Zhou Keir in one arm, Zhang Yi, thanks to his combat suit, found the extra weight of 90 kilograms to be surprisingly light and not too taxing. Zhang Yi opened the 2-tier dimensional gate and headed north, disappearing from view in an instant. Old Tian took up guard at the cave entrance with his men and weapons, silently waiting for Zhang Yi to return and lead them to safety. As it turned out, Zhang Yi's ability to escape was absolutely top-notch, provided he didn't have any unnecessary burdens. The maximum distance of a single space shuttle jump was about 1,000 meters. As long as he didn't encounter any mutants who could forcibly restrict his displacement, he could escape from any trap. This 2-person formation was so well concealed that even the Columbia Navy, which boasted the world's strongest navy, was unable to search for them. After more than half an hour, Zhang Yi and the others finally arrived on land after a series of twists and turns. After judging their current location and adjusting their direction of travel, they returned to Tianhai City after more than 10 minutes. Looking at the iconic tall TV tower in Tianhai City, Zhang Yi and Zhou Keir couldn't help but let out a long breath. It had been 4 or 5 months since they left. They were finally back, and it felt like an eternity since they had left. Zhang Yi turned on his communication device and contacted his family. "I'm home." Soon, he was back in the warm and comfortable sanctuary. The whole family was overjoyed to see them return. Yang Xia, Yang Xinxin, and Lu Karen were all in tears of joy, scrambling to embrace Zhang Yi. Hua Hua the cat meowed, leaping onto Zhang Yi's head first, where she lay on his head, licking his ears and side of his face, making Zhang Yi giggle with laughter. Fatty Sue and Uncle Yu were also very excited, but they didn't get the chance to intervene, so they could only look at Zhang Yi with a smile on their faces and say, "That's great, you're finally back." This was probably the warmth of home. When people are tired from being away, they always hope to find a place for their hearts and bodies to return to. At first, this group of people, who had banded together just to survive, slowly became like family to one another. And they had no idea about what had happened during the time they were at sea. When Zhang Yi finally shut down all communications, he briefly mentioned the situation to Yang Xinxin. So they had been worried sick about what had happened to Zhang Yi and Zhou Qi at sea. Now that they had returned safely, how could they not be overjoyed? The group of people pulled Zhang Yi and Zhou Qi in, and they all asked them at once about what had happened at sea. Zhang Yi was planning to go back immediately and bring Zhu Lark back first. It didn't matter if the others were at sea. It's just that Zhu Lark is Zhu Zheng's niece, and if anything happened to her, it would be hard to explain to Zhu Zheng. However, this thought was temporarily put aside the moment Zhang Yi returned to the shelter. He had been adrift at sea for 4 months, which had been really hard. Especially when they were in the ice mist sea, the oppressive, eerie and dull atmosphere made him very irritable. Only at such times can one appreciate the warmth and preciousness of home. Zhang Yi first took a warm, hot shower, changed into a soft, clean pair of pajamas, and then came to the living room. Yang Xia and Zhou Haimei were preparing food in the kitchen. Yang Xinxin, Lu Karen and the others were all looking at Zhang Yi expectantly on the sofa. They had so much they wanted to say to Zhang Yi, and they also wanted to hear about Zhang Yi and Zhou Qi's experiences at sea. Zhang Yi sipped on a steaming cappuccino as he began to tell them about his time at sea. Chapter 902, Everyone is Improving. As Zhang Yi recounted what had happened at sea, the group couldn't help but let out a series of exclamations as they listened. Sometimes they laughed at the actions of the people on the ship. Sometimes they worried about the dangers they encountered along the way. In particular, after learning that Zhang Yi had sunk a Colombian Navy warship, they were even more scared. Among the Columbus Ocean Fleet, there is a top-level mutant with a supernatural ability index of 18,000 points. Zhang Yi took a sip of coffee and said to the group in a light tone. Fatty Sue couldn't help but swallow his saliva. 18,000 points. That's almost 10,000 points higher than you, boss. Although the ability index cannot absolutely represent the strength of combat effectiveness, if it exceeds by such a large amount, there is no doubt that the opponent's strength is overwhelmingly powerful. Uncle Yu also frowned and anxiously said, there isn't even a single Epsilon-class mutant in the entire Jiangnan region. If we encounter him, what are we going to do? Zhang Yi shook his head and said calmly, don't worry too much, someone from the East Sea region is covering for us. Even the top mutants cannot do whatever they want in the face of forces with absolutely powerful weapons. No matter how powerful you are, if you are targeted by the H submarine, a single shot from the Reaper of Love, which has a 100-kilometer range, can kill you in seconds. Unless you have the special ability to sense impending danger in advance, like Mayumi Takeuchi, even Zhang Yi would find it difficult to survive in that situation. Yang Xinxin leaned against Zhang Yi and looked at him curiously. Brother, what are you going to do next? Are you going to go back to Blizzard City first and then ask Zhu Jing to send someone to rescue them? Zhang Yi thought for a moment and said, I plan to go rescue Zhu Lark first. A dark light flashed in Yang Xinxin's eyes. But brother, according to what you said, the Colombian Navy is surely trying to capture you. They have heavily armed troops surrounding the waters of the Huashu Kingdom, and even if you go to Zhu Zheng, they won't be able to send a ship out. In the end, you will still have to take action. Zhang Yi naturally understood this, and he shrugged. As long as I show my face, then the Jiangnan region can release the news that I have returned with important information. By then, the Colombian Navy will have no need to blockade the sea, will they? That's not necessarily the case. Yang Xinxin said with a smile, if I were an officer of Colombia, I would continue to keep an eye on all sea voyages from the Huashu Kingdom. And be even more cautious than before. At this time, the intelligence from the source of God had already been brought back by Zhang Yi, so he did not hide it from his family and told them about its existence. Yang Xinxin said, you obtain the intelligence from the open sea, so they may be able to guess the exact location of the source of God. Most likely, it is not on Huashu Kingdom soil. In that case, they will be watching us even more closely. Do you agree? Zhang Yi smiled, there is nothing wrong with what you said. It's just that this kind of thing is not something I need to worry about for the time being. Just let Zhu Zheng and the others go gamble. When it comes to the regional level, the matters involved become extremely complicated. Yang Xinxin countered, but brother, don't you want to obtain the source of God? Zhang Yi's eyes revealed a meaningful smile. He rubbed his hands and said, that depends on whether the benefits of obtaining it are proportional to the risks. Zhang Yi decided that after a day of rest, he would adjust his state to the best, and then go back and bring Zhu Lark back to Zhu Zheng to hand in his work. Then he would tell him the news about the source of God, and let Zhu Zheng arrange it afterwards. No matter how great the benefits of the source of God were, he would always get a share. After all, he was currently the most powerful person in the Jiangnan region, and Zhu Zheng would have to rely on his strength if he wanted to obtain the source of God in full view of everyone. Yang Xinxin nodded and suddenly looked at the others and said, you haven't been back for a long time, and we haven't been idle at home. We've prepared some surprises for you, you can have a look, they'll definitely be helpful. Zhang Yi looked curiously at everyone and said, oh? Then I'm looking forward to it. Yang Xia excitedly came up to Zhang Yi holding a huge lunchbox. Zhang Yi, try this. Her eyes were shining, and she looked at Zhang Yi with anticipation. Zhang Yi reached out and took the lunchbox, taking out a piece of pastry and shoving it into his mouth. His eyes soon lit up, the supernatural energy provided by your supernatural food has increased. Yang Xia's supernatural food provided at least twice the energy of before. This was very important to Zhang Yi. You have to understand that, given his current level of supernatural ability, after every battle, he would need to eat a lot to restore his supernatural energy. However, normal eating and digestion would result in a very slow recovery of supernatural powers. With the supernatural food provided by Yang Xia, he would have a special advantage in future battles, he could fight a war of attrition. Yang Xia beamed with joy at Zhang Yi's praise. She lifted her chin, revealing her snow-white neck, and her slender figure was so attractive that people couldn't take their eyes off her. Of course. While you were gone, I've been working hard too. You just didn't see it. Because she was making supernatural food, her food intake was almost equivalent to 10 people's portions, and she was sick of eating every day. The people in the shelter were not leading an easy life either. They knew that with Zhang Yi's talent, he would become even stronger in the future. If they didn't work hard to improve themselves, sooner or later they would not be able to keep up with Zhang Yi. Therefore, everyone is working hard in secret. Even Zhou Haimei, an inability user, has been working hard on gourmet food and practicing yoga for 2 to 3 hours a day. Zhang Yi nodded, you've done a great job, you've worked hard. Yang Xia rarely received a compliment from Zhang Yi outside the bedroom, and she couldn't help but feel a little bit sad. Little pearls were rolling in her eyes. It's good that I can help you. Uncle Yu and Fatty Su also hurriedly demonstrated the results of their training over this period of time. Every once in a while, Uncle Yu and Fatty Su would go to Blizzard City. The two of them had become accustomed to receiving special training. Uncle Yu had currently improved his abilities to the extreme of the Gamma level, and his body could no longer be strengthened. So he began to use external objects. For example, he became obsessed with large-caliber weapons. As for Fatty Sue, the reason he went to Blizzard City was to practice a very new thing. No one knows what he's been practicing, but every time he comes back, he looks exhausted but refreshed. What Zhang is most looking forward to is still the mechanical expert Lu Karen. In the past 4 months, she has improved her ability in divine machine operation a lot, and the weapons she has developed are even more powerful. Chapter 903, Updating Equipment. Zhang Yi looked forward to seeing Lu Karen. Lu Karen, have you made any new inventions recently? Lu Karen pursed her lips, looking nervous and a little proud. She looked at Hua Hua, who was lying on Zhang Yi's lap, and said, "Hua Hua, show off." Zhang Yi curiously looked down at Hua Hua. He saw Hua Hua slowly stand up and stretch. Then it shook its head, and a layer of silver light appeared around its neck. When Zhang Yi first returned, he noticed that there was an additional silver collar around Hua Hua's neck. He didn't pay much attention to it, thinking it was just a piece of jewelry. But then, without warning, the collar unfolded like a transformer, and turned into a silver armor that covered Hua Hua's black fur. In an instant, Hua Hua had become a majestic armored beast. This thing is kind of interesting. Zhang Yi couldn't help but laugh. Lu Karen gave a smug smile and said, "And that's not all. Hua Hua, grow." Hua Hua jumped to the open space not far away and, with a change of posture, immediately turned into a giant creature with a height of 5 or 6 meters and a body length of nearly 10 meters. The chandelier was pushed up against the ceiling by it, clanking noisily, and the living room could barely contain it. However, the silver armor kept fitting its body, growing larger and larger as it grew larger. Zhang Yi was extremely surprised. What kind of technology is this? Lu Karen was proud to see Zhang Yi's shocked expression. This is memory metal. After I created it with my hands, it can expand and contract according to its size. I spent a lot of effort designing it to achieve this effect. Zhang Yi walked over and touched it with his hands. The metal was incredibly light but exceptionally tough. Hua Hua itself has extremely strong defensive capabilities, but with this additional layer of armor, it will be able to charge recklessly in future battles. Not bad, this effect is great. Zhang Yi praised repeatedly. Lu Karen walked over, and she was very happy to receive Zhang Yi's praise. "Brother Zhang Yi, you can give me your combat suit and weapons tonight. I'll help you modify them a bit more, and I guarantee that they'll be even more useful than before." Zhang Yi nodded without hesitation. "Okay, I'll leave it to you." He could only rest for one night, and he still had to go back tomorrow to pick up Zhu Lark and the others. In other words, Lu Karen would have to stay up late tonight to help him modify his weapons and combat uniform. As her abilities improved, she would definitely be able to upgrade Zhang Yi's weapons and equipment to a stronger version, which Zhang Yi would of course be more than happy to do. After everyone had finished talking about their changes, Zhang Yi couldn't help but look over at Yang Xinxin. She had been sitting on the sofa, elegantly crossing her legs and drinking milk tea. Zhang Yi walked over curiously, leaned over to her and asked with a smile, "Xinxin, what about you? Did you prepare any surprises for your brother?" Yang Xinxin looked up with a smile. "Brother, Xinxin is the intellectual type. In our team, I am of course the military strategist. While you were away in Tianhai City, I managed to get things in order here." She told Zhang Yi about her arrangements for the major powers in Tianhai City. 4 months was a long time. Although Zhang Yi's dimensional space contained a large amount of supplies, as the strength of the mutants in the shelters increased, the amount of food required would also continue to increase. Moreover, the major shelters also needed long-term development. Without reasonable overall planning, there was no way to achieve sustainable development. "Do you still remember Li Jian?" Yang Xinxin asked. Zhang Yi nodded. "Of course I remember, what about him?" Yang Xinxin said, "His ability is useless in battle, but it is a godsend in terms of daily life. I have each refuge build farms underground and grow crops using ultraviolet light. Under the current special circumstances, this approach would not have been feasible and the food production rate would have been extremely low. However, with Li Jian's ability, this will be much easier." Yang Xinxin laughed. He can increase the survival rate and yield of food, and even shorten the growth cycle of food. This is very useful for us. Zhang Yi raised an eyebrow. Sure enough, there are no useless supernatural abilities, only useless mutants. As long as everyone is in the right position, they can all play their due role. Yang Xinxin said to Zhang Yi, I think we can figure out a way to help these supplementary mutants improve their abilities. After all, they are unable to actively obtain the origin of the supernatural, and it is difficult for them to improve their own strength. Zhang Yi nodded. He had already thought about this point for a long time. However, at present, we do not have this technology. If we want to do it, we will have to rely on the technology from Blizzard City. The forces that have relatively mature training techniques for mutants are only the research department and Deng's technology. Zhang Yi smiled faintly. Dealing with them is not that easy. You ask them to do you a favor once, and you never know what price you will be asked to pay in the future. Yang Xinxin's gaze fell on Zhou Keir. Then it's up to you, Sister Zhou. As an expert in the field of medicine, Zhou Keir was naturally proficient in pharmacology. Together with Lu Karen's help in analyzing the ingredients of the medicine, they could obtain the main ingredients from the medicine they had previously exchanged to help enhance the abilities of the mutants. Perhaps one day, they would be able to help those around them unlock their supernatural powers without relying on Blizzard City. After all, theoretically speaking, after the end of the world, many people have the potential to become mutants. But in order to actually become a mutant, one needs a certain amount of luck. Talent and luck, these two things are indispensable. And the latter can now be provided artificially. We'll talk about these things later. Zhang Yi closed his eyes and lay on the soft sofa. He didn't like managing too many people, it was very troublesome. I'll bring back a group of people later, and you can assign them tasks then. Yang Xinxin nodded. Okay, brother. After dinner that night, Zhang Yi chatted with everyone for a while before going to his room to rest. He still had to set off again the next day to return to the island in the South China Sea. That night, Lu Karen was busy in her studio, working away non-stop. That night, Yang Xinxin sneaked into Zhang Yi's room. During the day, there were things she didn't say to Zhang Yi. Although the relationships among the people in the shelter were now harmonious, there were still some very important things that she was only willing to tell Zhang Yi. An idea came to her, an idea that would definitely benefit Zhang Yi, but that Zhang Yi himself might not be willing to do. The next morning, after Zhang Yi got up, he went straight to Lu Karen's studio. After a busy night, Lu Karen fell asleep on the workbench. However, the weapon and combat uniform that Zhang Yi had given her had been modified and were quietly lying in the box next to her. Chapter 904, Reward at Sea. Zhang Yi walked over and looked at Lu Karen's sweet and innocent profile and couldn't help but smile tenderly. His gaze, however, inadvertently fell on the wall. One thing caught his attention. It was a pair of silver-gray robotic arms, slightly thicker than a human arm, and they looked a bit rough and unpainted. But if you looked closely, you could see that the joints were extremely finely manufactured. Zhang Yi walked over and reached down to take it off, noticing that it wasn't heavy, weighing in at about 5 or 6 kilograms. It was also hollow inside, apparently a new type of exoskeleton armor. This made Zhang Yi think of what Lu Karen had mentioned before, that her biggest dream was to create a powerful humanoid armor. And at this time of year, large armored robots were definitely not realistic, and small humanoid exoskeletons were definitely the best choice. Just then, Lu Karen woke up. Zhang Yi, brother. She rubbed her eyes and saw Zhang Yi playing with her mechanical arm. She blushed and quickly walked over to take it back. It's not done yet. I can't show it to you. She quickly put the mechanical arm in a toolbox and closed the lid tightly. Zhang Yi shrugged his shoulders. What, keeping secrets from me? Lu Karen's face turned red, and she felt very embarrassed. It was as if she were a middle school girl who had just tried her hand at writing a romance novel, only to have it accidentally seen by her sweetheart. Right now I just have a general idea, so I'll build it and take a look first. It's still a long way from being finished. Zhang Yi laughed. Okay, Okay, I'll look forward to seeing your finished product. By the way, if you need any materials, let me know and I'll have someone find them for you. This kind of small exoskeleton doesn't consume much material. Lu Karen heard Zhang Yi say this and replied with a smile, "Thank you, brother Zhang Yi. I have already asked Xiao Honglian, Xing Tian, and Chen Jingguan, and they have all been very cooperative. It's only been a matter of dismantling a few warships and a few dozen tanks." Zhang Yi's smile suddenly froze on his face. It was only dismantling a few warships and a few dozen tanks? Are you trying to build a mechanical exoskeleton or an aircraft carrier? Lu Karen said weakly, "I want to build exoskeleton armor that can adapt to temperatures as low as -100 degrees Celsius. The core material I need must be the best metal. Ordinary steel is completely unsuitable and must be obtained from the cores of military equipment." Her big innocent eyes looked at Zhang Yi. "Brother, didn't you say that you would support me as much as you could?" Zhang Yi, ... cough cough, "Of course. But it's just some warships and battle tanks, you can just dismantle them. As long as it's enough. God knows, there are only 5 warships left in the Chaoyu base." Lu Karen happily clapped her hands. "I knew you were the best, brother. Well, now we have half the materials." Zhang Yi almost fell to the ground. "Half? Well, okay, I'll figure out the rest." Although it hurt a little, Zhang Yi had great faith in Lu Karen's abilities. And he also understood that, as Lu Karen had said, in the Ice Age, mechanical products were prone to various faults and extremely difficult to use. With Lu Karen's abilities, naturally she would create a top-notch exoskeleton armor. She was a mechanical artist with extremely high standards for her work and naturally sought perfection. Zhang Yi was looking forward to seeing what kind of contraption she would create. If it works well, maybe they can mass-produce a few, and he can have some fun with them, or Uncle Yu and Fatty Sue can use them. "By the way, how's my equipment coming along?" Zhang Yi asked, as he was about to head out. Lu Karen quickly took out Zhang Yi's weaponry. The Thunderstrike and White Owl have been recalibrated, with improved stability and range. They've also been given a general maintenance. And the biggest change is still in your combat suit. The previous combat suit did not take naval combat into account. During this time, I thought that you would definitely need it someday, so I added an underwater propulsion device, a compressed oxygen storage compartment, and a pressure resistance system. And I also added miniature torpedoes to the arms. Lu Karen lifted the arm of the combat suit and gently pressed a switch, and sure enough, 10 miniature torpedoes were revealed underneath. They are about 10 centimeters long and 10 millimeters in diameter. In addition, there is a box of 1,000 reserve torpedoes. Zhang Yi was overjoyed to see this contraption. During this voyage, he had been stumped by the lack of underwater combat equipment when facing the Fin Dragon. If he had had this kind of thing earlier, combined with his supernatural powers, don't look at a tiny little miniature torpedo, the destructive power it can create is definitely no less than a conventional high-speed torpedo. Lu Karen had considered everything so thoroughly, and must have worried about him all day long before carefully making the improvement plan. "Thank you, Karen, I really like your modification." Zhang Yi smiled happily. Lu Karen lowered his head shyly, his fingers stirring behind his back. "I'm glad you like it." Zhang Yi thought for a moment and said, "Don't worry, I'll definitely give you a state-of-the-art warship to disassemble later." Zhang Yi had a hunch. If he wanted to go to the Misty Valley on Star Island to find the source of God, sooner or later he would clash with the maritime powers in the ocean zone. Columbus Ocean Fleet, the Marine Navy, the Neon Maritime Self-Defense Force. At that time, he would definitely have to surprise those guys and thank them for the trouble they had caused him during his voyage. Zhang Yi packed up his weapons and equipment, then went back to change into his combat uniform. After making sure that there was nothing wrong with his whole body, he left the shelter and headed towards the South China Sea. But as the saying goes, man plans but God laughs. After all, Zhang Yi could not have considered every situation. And there were some unexpected events in the southern waters. Half a month ago, the Columbia Navy discovered that Zhang Yi was suspected of possessing information about the source of God. Five-star Fleet Admiral Douglas personally ordered that Zhang Yi be captured alive at all costs. However, due to the timely response of the East Sea region, the Columbia Navy was unable to act, and did not have much manpower to pursue Zhang Yi. Moreover, Zhang Yi had burned his boats and directly blocked all electronic signals, which made their pursuit even more difficult. At this time, the Columbus Ocean Fleet adopted another method, issuing a reward. In addition to the open sea, the Southern Sea, the Sea of Stars, and even the southeastern sea surrounding the territorial waters of the Huaqiu Kingdom, large and small forces alike received official documents from the Columbus Ocean Fleet. As long as they spotted any ships from the Huaqiu Kingdom, if they could capture the people on board alive and deliver them to the Columbia Navy, they would receive an incredibly generous reward. Even if they only provided information, they would also receive a considerable reward after it was confirmed. The Tianlong pirates, the kings of the Starry Sea located in the territorial waters of the Huaqiu Kingdom, naturally received this reward as well. Chapter 905, Unit 1. After receiving the reward from the Columbia Navy, the Sky Dragon King did not hesitate and immediately ordered all 6 fleets under his command to go out and search for the location of the Huaqiu Kingdom ships with all their strength. After the battle in Tianhai City, the entire 4th team of the Sky Dragon pirates was wiped out, and the Jiangnan and East Sea regions then joined forces to wipe out the Sky Dragon pirates. In the time that followed, the Rose Squad of the Jiangnan region entered the Starry Sea to hunt down the Sky Dragon pirates and try to find the location of Sky Dragon Island. This once forced the mighty Sky Dragon King to hide in a bunker all day. He was not afraid of the Rose Squad. But once their position was revealed, within a minute, the Reaper of Love from the Jiangnan region would descend upon them. Even as the overlord of the Starry Sea, they would be reduced to ashes under that kind of weapon. So the Sky Dragon King was depressed beyond words during this period of time, and hated the people of the Huaqiu Kingdom. Therefore, this time, he had the opportunity to both retaliate against the Jiangnan region and curry favor with the Columbia Navy, which would earn him a generous reward. For him, it was killing 3 birds with 1 stone, so of course he was more than happy. Zhang Yi had arranged for Jules Arc and the others to be at a place called Rocky Island. After Zhang Yi had eliminated all the pirates on the island, he thought that no news would leak out for a short period of time. But he didn't realize that this area was precisely the sea patrolled by the first team of the Sky Dragon pirates. In order to search for information on Zhang Yi and the others, they patrol the entire sea area every day. But this day, when the pirate ship passed Rocky Island, they discovered that the island was completely silent, with not a single living soul. This immediately alerted the pirates. The news was quickly reported to the captain of the first team, near it, and got his ear. These pirates are cautious by nature. Those who work with a sword for a living can lose their heads if they aren't careful. So they are very concerned about any unusual phenomenon in their territory. After hearing the news, Captain Nerrit immediately called his deputy, Guna. Guna! Take someone with you and find out what's going on there. A person walked out of the cabin. A woman. A tall woman carrying an oddly shaped large rifle on her back. Guna had brown skin that had turned nearly black from being on the sea for so long. Under her gray felt hat, it was hard to make out her facial features, unless her eyes were open and her white sockets were exposed. But those eyes, which one only had to look into once, made one feel a chill down their spine, as if they had been fixed on by a poisonous snake. Yes, Captain. Guna's voice was a little hoarse. After receiving the order, she turned directly and left. She led dozens of pirates and sailed towards Rocky Island. Soon, they arrived at the island. As soon as they arrived, the strong smell of blood alerted Guna. She raised the corner of her mouth. It seems that there has been a fierce battle here. A group of pirates, led by her, headed up the mountain towards Rocky Island. 10 minutes later, in the cave where old Tian and the others were hiding, 7 or 8 crew members were killed outright. Their bodies had been opened up by huge gashes, as if some kind of strong acid solution had corroded out near regular round holes, which looked extremely strange. Li Zhongyu was covered in blood and was weak, collapsed against the wall, with a gun pressed against his head. Lu Dehai and several other men on the ship had also tried to fight back, but in the face of absolute force, it was futile. Old Tian, a 7-foot-tall man, was picked up by Guna, who had him by the neck with one hand. She looked at the old man playfully and said in the local dialect, "You are from the Huashu Kingdom? Then you'd better pray that one of you is the person the Dragon King is looking for. Otherwise." She held up a finger with sharp, long nails, and with just one gentle stab, pierced right through old Tian's bulletproof vest and into his chest. Ah! Old Tian couldn't help but let out a painful cry. "Stop, the person you're looking for is me." Just then, Jules Arc could no longer bear it and took the initiative to step forward. She knew that there was no point in hiding anymore. This group of pirates had come here for a purpose. If she didn't step forward, then everyone here would have to go through harsh interrogations. Not to mention that she couldn't bear the punishment herself. Just saying that there were so many people on the ship, someone would definitely take the initiative to expose her identity. Jules Arc felt that it would be better if she came forward, and it might buy some time. She thought that she was after all Zhu Zheng's niece, and these pirates would be afraid of her status and give her some face. Guna saw Jules Arc. Jules Arc had an obnoxious temperament, that of a young lady's arrogance. Even if she hid it well, the arrogance in her eyes and movements was impossible to change. "Who are you?" Guna asked in a low voice. Jules Arc took a deep breath. Everyone was looking at her. With Zhang Yi gone, she was these people's best hope for survival. She tried hard to calm herself. "My name is Jules Arc, I am the Supreme Commander of the Jiangnan region, and the niece of Zhu Zheng. You'd better let us go. Otherwise you absolutely won't be able to bear the wrath of my uncle." Ah! Jules Arc's words had not finished when Guna slapped her hard in the face. Jules Arc was sent tumbling to the ground, spitting blood from her mouth. Guna glared at her viciously. "Jiangnan region, that old thing was your uncle, wasn't he? Damn woman, do you know how much trouble your uncle has caused us?" Jules Arc froze. How was the plot unfolding so different from what she had imagined? Wasn't the other party afraid of her uncle? Guna said with disgust, "I hate you stuck-up little princesses like you. Today I'll teach you a lesson you'll never forget." After she finished speaking, she gave a sign to the pirates nearby. 4 or 5 pirates let out lewd grins and surrounded Jules Arc with a lewd smirk. In an instant, Jules Arc felt her blood run cold. Even though she had never experienced anything like this before, she had seen it in movies before. She knew exactly what was going to happen next. Jules Arc desperately called for help and begged for mercy. But the pirates just looked at the men surrounding Jules Arc with a mocking smile on their faces as they took each step. Although the other passengers on the ship couldn't bear to watch, they were being held at gunpoint, and there was a huge disparity in strength. It would be suicide for them to rush up and try to be heroes, so they could only lower their heads and not look at the scene. Jules Arc wailed in despair, weeping, as her clothes were quickly torn to shreds by the pirates. She wanted to die. But just as the final step was about to be taken, Guna shouted a harsh rebuke. The pirates immediately stopped what they were doing and returned to their positions. Guna looked at Jules Arc, who had lost the light in her eyes and was looking like she had nothing to live for, and a mocking and contented smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. Seeing this arrogant young lady being tortured to the point of collapse excited her. However, as a member of the pirate crew, she knew the value of the niece of the Supreme Commander of the Jiangnan region, and could not possibly let anything happen to her here. As long as she was scared, then no matter what she was asked to do next, she would cooperate honestly. What was that saying? Shoot first and ask questions later.